Hello and welcome back to the Jobless Bum YouTube channel. I hope you are all having a fantastic day today. Today, we're going to be ranking the logos of the NBA, the National Basketball Association, in a tier list, and we're going to see which ones are really good logos and which ones are not so good. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. Starting out our tier list, we do have the Washington Wizards. I have a few issues with this logo. This is a common trend in the NBA, by the way, where a lot of their logos have to in some way feature a basketball. And I think that's a hallmark of an NBA logo for most teams, is that they have the actual basketball in the logo. And I think that kind of limits the artistic expression that can be had in a logo if you're constrained with having to have a basketball in it. However, at least in this logo, you do have what appears to be a wand and then the star representing some sort of magic from a wizard. Fun fact, the Washington Wizards actually used to be called the Washington Bullets. Obviously, they had to get rid of that name because of the violent implications. But I'm going to put it in the C tier. I think it's a pretty bad logo, given that it is just the basketball, but you do have this wand and the star kind of breaking up the monotony, so it's not just a basketball. So for that reason, I'll put it in the C tier. Also, I'm going to remove the F tier because I don't think we will need it. I usually do 5 tiers on my tier list. Next up, we do have the Golden State Warriors, who are one of the top teams in the NBA. They just won the NBA championship, and they are located in San Francisco, which is in California, and California is known as the Golden State, so that's how they got their name, which they have a very unconventional naming style for professional sports teams. But I do like the inclusion of the Golden Gate Bridge, which is a landmark in San Francisco, their home city. So it really represents the city well. My only thing is that it doesn't really represent the name Warriors that well. But I do like the colors on it. It's got this nice blue and this yellow gold, which is very good. I'm going to put it in the A tier. It's a really solid logo, but it could have been better if they had some sort of representation of a warrior in there as well. But it's a very solid logo, so we'll put it in the A tier. Next up, we do have the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I really like this logo a lot. You have this really, I'll say, menacing looking wolf logo on there. You got this dark and light blue and this gray. I think those colors really work together. You got a little bit of green that kind of draws your eye to it, maybe representing the moon, which it's howling at. So I think that's really cool. It does suffer the basketball curse, but I think the basketball is actually kind of cool, as it kind of maybe represents some variations in the sky as a backdrop for the wolf logo. So I think this is a really good logo. I think this is going to be our first entrant in the S tier. I really like this logo a lot. I think it's one of the best logos in the NBA. Next up, we do have the Oklahoma City Thunder, and this is a really bad logo. There's no representation of thunder in there. You got an out-of-place basketball, and the text font looks like it's straight out of like MS Word 2000 clip art. It's just not a very good logo. It looks very amateurish. Like, this looks like a minor league team. It's really bad. Oklahoma City Thunder is going into the D tier. Next up, we do have the Phoenix Suns, and I think this is a really interesting logo. You got some sort of movement. You got these streaks behind the basket, which I think is cool. I really value that a lot, showing some sort of movement. I think that's a cool aspect of design. You got these kind of rays coming off of the basketball, symbolizing like a sun. And I think the basketball here is pretty tasteful because they are the suns. The sun is kind of orange, you know, yellow, depending on how you interpret it. So I think a basketball is actually a pretty good interpretation of what the Suns name means. So I think this is actually one of the few instances where the basketball is used in a good way. So I'm going to put the Phoenix Suns in the S tier. I think this is a really good logo. Next up, we do have the San Antonio Spurs. And this is an actual representation of a spur. Now, I'm not exactly sure what a spur is. It has to do, I think, with like horses in some way. It has to do with cowboys, at least. But I think it has to do with horses. I think it's a cool logo. You got this gray and black. I'm a bit not as in favor of it because of the colors and what the Spurs used to have. They used to have some more interesting colors. They had this like light teal. They had like a pink. They had orange and yellow as their colors, as well as the black and gray, which I thought was better. But I think this looks sleek. It looks modern. This is probably a B for me. It's not stellar, but it's also not just a basketball, so I do appreciate that. Next up, we do have the Philadelphia 76ers, and this is kind of unoriginal, I'll say, just putting the number 76. It is sleek. It is simple. You do have these stars, I think symbolizing the 13 colonies, which is what 76ers is referencing, the year 1776, where America got its independence from the tyrannical rulers of Britain. So I do like that little touch. I think there's probably some more overt ways you could have gone with this logo, but I think it's pretty solid. I'm going to put the 76ers in the B tier. I don't think it's an A or an S, but it's also not as bad as some of the other logos on this list. So I'll put it in the B tier. Next up, we do have the Houston Rockets, and you got this R that kind of looks like a rocket propelling up into space. You got like a circle ring around it, which, you know, is kind of how the smoke works when you're going up into space. So I like this imagery. I think the logo representing the Houston Rockets could be a lot better. I think it could be one of the best logos if you implemented an actual rocket. It's a bit simplistic for me, which is why I don't like a lot of the logos in the NBA. But it's not like one of the worst. It's probably a B tier logo, but just for the wasted potential, I'm going to put it in the C tier. Next up, we do have the Toronto Raptors, and this one is just a basketball. It's honestly pretty bad. You do have these kind of claws that are coming out on the side of the basketball, which does give it some sort of edge in terms of just being a basketball, but compared to what they used to have an actual dinosaur raptor as their logo. Honestly, this is going to go in the D tier. And there's just so much potential that you could have had with a dinosaur logo to make it look cool and menacing and stuff. And then you just chose to go with a basketball? That's not good. I don't like it. We're going to put it in the D tier. Next up, we do have the Detroit Pistons. And a piston is a part of a car, so I'm not exactly sure how you could make that a good logo. I will say they used to have like a horse as their logo as a representation for horsepower, which is, you know, a car metric. So I actually really liked that logo. But again, the Pistons, as well as the Raptors, both fell into this trap of going for a physical representation of basketball as their logo, rather than the name of their team, which was much cooler, in favor of this more simplistic design, which is I just don't like it. I think it's not a good design. Detroit Pistons are also going into the B tier. Next up, we do have the New Orleans Pelicans, and again, we have the basketball in the logo, but at least it's not just the basketball. We have a pretty menacing looking Pelican, and when the New Orleans Pelicans announced that they were going to change their name from the Hornets to the Pelicans in order to give the name the Hornets back to the city of Charlotte, I was a bit skeptical because how can you make a Pelican look menacing? But they have made the Pelican look pretty menacing in this one. It's very bold, very mean looking. You got some nice colors in there too. This red on the beak really stands out. And that's probably the most menacing feature of a Pelican. It's its beak. I like this logo. I think I'm going to put it in the A tier. I think it's a really good logo. Next up, we do have the Indiana Pacers, and this one is also very terrible. You just got the P and the basketball. Now, again, this is kind of another situation where I'm not really sure how you could have made a good logo out of this name, because they are the Pacers, which I believe has to do with the pace car in an auto sports race. So I don't know how you could have made that good. Also, I think it could reference a pace horse in like a horse race. In either case, it's referring to the pace car / horse, which is in front, but it's not actually competing. So I don't know how you could have made this a good logo, but it's just very bad. You just got a P in a basketball. This doesn't really scream to me like Pacers. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in the D tier. Next up, we do have the Denver Nuggets, and a nugget being the gold that's in the ground in mountains that has to be mined out. So you got these little pickaxes in the logo, then you got the gold and the mountain in the top of the logo. You got a little basketball, but I like the symmetry of everything. You got the pickaxe tops of coming together in this circular fashion. So I really like it. I like the colors. I think the colors are good too. I'm gonna put this in the A tier. I don't think it's quite an S tier logo, but I think it's a really good logo. I'm gonna put it in the A tier. Next up, we have the Brooklyn Nets. And this is a case where they didn't even try. There's no net on the logo. You just got the basketball and the fact it just says Nets. They didn't even try. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in the D tier. You got to at least try to get into one of these top tiers. All of these logos tried to be a representation of their team. These ones, they just quit before they even started. Next up, we do have the Dallas Mavericks, and I like this logo. You got this representation of a wild horse, which is really a maverick in some aspects, living its own life, its own way. So I think that's pretty cool. I like the colors. I like the blue and then the black and the white and the gray. I think those are all really good color choices. Again, you do have the basketball in the logo, which kind of takes it down in my book. It just doesn't make that much sense in my mind, but I think this is a solid logo. I'll put it in the B tier. I think it could have been a lot worse, but it's not up to the quality of the S or the A tier. All right, next up, we do have the Orlando Magic, and I really like the colors on this logo. You got the stars, this little streak behind it. It kind of looks like a comet, but I also can see the magic. It's got magical energy behind it. The color of the basketball is also this fantastical light blue color. So I think that's really cool. I think the basketball works in this sense because the basketball is possessed by the Magic and it's being passed. It's got some movement. I think it's really cool. You know what? I'll put the Orlando Magic in the S tier. I really like this logo and I really like the colors too. The uniforms are really good for them. So I'll put the Orlando Magic in the S tier. Next up, we do have the Los Angeles Lakers, and this is an iconic logo, but it's also very bad. Again, I don't know how you could really represent the Lakers as a logo. You know, Lakers being people from the lakes, because they were actually originally in Minneapolis, and then they moved to LA in like the 60s, and then they became this, worldwide phenomenon. If anybody has heard of an NBA team, they've probably either heard of the Bulls or the Lakers. But it's just not a good logo. I do like the text on the logo. I like that font, but it's not enough to get me out of the D tier for the Lakers. And I do like the colors too. The Lakers are an iconic franchise, and I think they deserve to have a better logo than this. It's just not good. Next up, we do have the New York Knicks. And again, I don't know how you could really represent this better, because the Knicks is just short for the Knickerbockers, which was the last name of the guy who founded the team. So I don't know how you could have made this better. I think maybe incorporating some of the New York skyline, maybe. I think that might have been good. Although I will say I do really like the colors, the blue and the orange. I think is a really good color combination. I like the epicness of this logo. The letters in the Knicks are rising, becoming almost sort of like monuments or statues. So I kind of like that. And I honestly think this is probably going to go in the C tier. It is just a basketball and a name, but the way they've presented it has made it into an actual logo and not just a basketball for me. So I like it. I'll put it in the C tier. Next up, we do have the Sacramento Kings. And I like this purple color in the logo. It is a very royal color in history. And I like the crown on the top of the logo, symbolizing the royal nature of the name Kings. And you got this little basketball at the bottom. It kind of turns into like almost like a head at the bottom with this like little semicircle. So I think that's kind of cool. I think it's going to go into the A tier. I think you probably could have like made this a little bit better, but in terms of like this simple, sleek style that I think a lot of modern logos are going for, I think it really fits well. I just personally don't like that style as much. I like the more ornate kind of stuff. If I'm talking about a logo. But I think it's still pretty cool. Next up, we do have the Utah Jazz. And they are represented by this little musical note, which I think is cool. It's a good representation. As someone in the comments said, maybe a piano could have been good. But I like this representation of the Jazz. Maybe like a saxophone or an actual jazz instrument could have been good. And I think in the past, they may have had a more ornate representation of the concept of jazz in their logo. But like I said before, a lot of these NBA teams are going for a more simplistic design in their logos, and in that aspect I think this is a pretty good logo. I'm going to put it in the A tier. I think it's a solid logo, but if you add a little bit more substance to the logo, I could potentially put it into the S tier, but as it is right now, I think it's a solid A tier for me. Next up, we do have the Charlotte Hornets, and we do have this really menacing looking hornet as the logo. It's not that hard to make a hornet look menacing because it is a predatory insect. I think it's cool. I like the colors a lot, the teal and the purple, and it's a classic amongst like streetwear people in terms of the colors. Streetwear enthusiasts, I'll say, really enjoy the color of the Charlotte Hornets. And I think it's pretty fashionable. I like their jerseys a lot. I've been tempted into getting a Charlotte Hornets jersey because it's just such a cool color scheme and it's pretty unique as well. So I think this is another entrant into our S tier. I really like this logo a lot. I think it's really good. And it's one of the top logos for me, so it's going into the S tier. Next up, we do have the Miami Heat. And I really like the color choice, this red and yellowish orange, representing the heat, the fire. You got the basketball and the flames coming off of it. I think that's a really nice touch. I think it also fits with basketball because a lot of times in basketball, players will be described as having the hot hand, or they're on fire, they're heating up. So I really like the concept of the firing, flaming basketball going through the hoop. I think that's a really good concept for a logo. It is a bit simplistic. I don't think they've changed their logo since they first came into the league in the 80s. So I think this logo probably could be due for a modern update, but in terms of just being a basketball, I think it's really good. I think with an update to a more stylized logo, like maybe kind of similar to like the Suns, I think it could be an S tier, but right now I think it's a pretty solid B tier. Next up, we do have the Atlanta Hawks. And this is a very simple logo, but I think it gets the point across. You have the beak of the hawk, and the hawk animal actually has like I mean, like, it depends on what kind of hawk it is, but I'm sure there's some hawks that have a white head. So I think that's pretty cool. I like the use of negative space as well, because you have all this white space that is technically unfilled, but it is filled by this image of a hawk. So I think that's really cool. I think this is a very sleek logo. This is where a simple logo can be really good and really effective. I think this is an S tier for me. I really like it a lot. Next up, we do have the Memphis Grizzlies, and I like this logo. You have these yellow eyes that really stand out amongst this blue, this light blue and this dark blue. It looks very menacing, and the darker blue makes it look like, you know, there's like a shadow, like there's a darker side to this grizzly than the already menacing light blue grizzly that we see, that perhaps there's maybe also a darker side that's even more vicious. So I really like that. I think it's a really good representation of what a grizzly is. I like the colors. I think this is going to go into the A tier. I think it probably could be better in some aspects. I think it is perhaps a bit too simplistic, but I think it's a really good logo. Next up, we have the Los Angeles Clippers. This is really bad. It could have been so much better too. Like, think about the kind of imagery that you could have with the Clippers, which a clipper is a kind of ship. Compared to my minor league baseball team, the Columbus Clippers, we have a logo that's just a C. But also, we have a secondary logo of a ship that looks really cool. I think they could have done so much better with this Los Angeles Clippers logo. And also, the letters that they chose aren't even looking that good. Like, this looks like a mess. It looks clunky. It doesn't look simplistic. It looks busy in the middle. And then you got this simplistic blah on the outside of it. It's just not very good. I'm going to put it in the D tier. It's not a very good logo. Next up, we do have the Boston Celtics. And this is a really old logo, I think. It's an old-timey logo, at least. You got this nice gentleman twirling a basketball around his finger. You know, an old sage at the game of basketball. He's got these nice shoes and stuff. The green is really cool. I think it's a really unique logo. I really like this one a lot. I'm going to put the Boston Celtics, I'm going to put it in the B tier. I think this is an aspect where it looks almost too realistic, and that kind of takes away a little bit. I mean, it is a cartoon, but I think you probably could have represented this in a better way. Like, I think the shamrock is a classic symbol of like Irish heritage, which is I think what they were trying to go for with this logo. I think perhaps that could have been better suited. And they do have some shamrock logos with the Boston Celtics. So I think that probably could have been better. And yeah, I think it also is a bit too detailed. I think in this aspect, a simple logo probably would have been better. So I think it's going to go into the B tier. I get where they're coming from, but I think this could have been executed a lot better. Next up, we do have the Cleveland Cavaliers, and it's just a C, but it's got this nice sword in the middle going through it. A Cavalier being a sort of swordsman. I think they could have done a lot better with this logo. Have some sort of a representation of a Cavalier. That might have been cool. I like the colors, though. This maroon and this gold, I think, is a good combination. I'm gonna put this in the C tier. I think it could have been D tier if it was just the letter, but the sword adds a little bit to it. It's just not very good. There could be a lot more done with this, and there's a lot of wasted potential. So I'm gonna put it in the C tier, which is kind of fitting because it is a C. Next up, we do have the Chicago Bulls, which is one of the most recognizable logos in the NBA because this is the team that Michael Jordan played for, one of the most successful teams of all time. And I will say this logo does look very classic. It looks menacing. Its simplicity also brings forth its menacingness as well, I think. I think it may be a bit too simplistic, but it works well on like, hats, shirts. I think it's a really good logo in terms of merchandising capabilities. So I like it. I think it's probably going to go into the A tier. because there probably could have been a little bit more done to it. I think it could be a little bit more modern. So I'm going to put it in the A tier. Then we do have the Milwaukee Bucks, which I think if the Bulls updated their logo to something like the Milwaukee Bucks, you know, in this sort of modernistic, simplistic style, I think that could be really good. But I really like this logo of the Bucks. It looks sleek, it looks modern, it looks menacing. You got these antlers, you know, it's ready to charge at you. It could be hard to make a deer look menacing, but this looks very menacing. I'm going to put this in the S tier. I think this is a really good logo. Last up, we do have the Portland Trailblazers, which is interesting. I'm sure they're trying to go for some kind of concept here, which I don't understand. It kind of honestly looks like the yin and the yang, which I think is an interesting concept. If you're going to be a trailblazer, you have to have some sort of inner peace. I think that's kind of some interesting representation if that's what they were going for. I don't think it really represents being a trailblazer though that much, but it is an interesting, unique logo. It's pretty recognizable. So I'll put it in the C tier. I like that they tried something different, but it doesn't really do anything for me, to be honest. All right, there's our tier list. I'm going to give you one final chance to take a look at our completed NBA logos tier list. Thank you so much for watching our NBA logos tier list. Let me know in the comments what you thought about the tier list and what some of your favorite NBA logos are. Again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, be sure to stay safe.